Hey everyone, I'm Chris Stegall with MK Partners, joined once again by Matt Kaufman. Matt, thanks for hopping on.
Thanks for having me.
And we are back. It is 2024. We are back with another one of our weekly videos. Matt, we got some fan mail over the break there, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Over winter break, we got a post on LinkedIn about one of our recent videos that we published, saying that it was terrible and the exact opposite of what you should do for a video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So less fan mail and more fan mail.
Yeah. But it's nice. It's nice to be recognized.
Yeah. At least we know people are watching.
Yeah, exactly.
But also it gives us a chance to maybe not clarify, but at least sort of focus in on what our goals are with these videos.
Yeah, so I think I've made it like a New Year's resolution of mine that if doing these videos as we do, which is basically you and I hopping on with little preparation, if any, if that's what we do, then I think we should do more of it and lean in to this. Because that's who I am, at least. Like, I didn't shave for this. I didn't dress up. I'm not wearing a suit. This is just very real life me. And so that's the purpose of this video, is for us to kind of show what we do every day. Problems come up, weird things come up. We learn new things, and that's what this is. It's not a professional YouTube video with a lot of editing and practice.
Yeah. And I think that gives a more authentic window into the way we work. And it also means we get to the answers more quickly because we're not having the answers sit in editing for 6 months while I make it look pretty or something.
Right. That's true. Yeah. If we solve something in one of these videos, you know that we solved it while making the video, usually, maybe right before, but it wasn't like months went into it. And so, of course, it turned out perfectly. In fact, I think we've had probably just as many videos where we could not solve the problem as ones where we could solve the problem. And that's about as realistic as it gets.
Yeah. And I think also a lot of times these videos are about us collaborating and coming up with something on the fly. And that happens a lot more comfortably and fluidly when people aren't stressed about also looking polished while they do it. If every time you have an idea of how something might work, but you have to go draft up a pixel perfect presentation, that's time that could have been spent finding out, this actually doesn't work so well.
Right. Yeah, I'll do a blatant shill for some of my Pluralsight videos that I've made. I had to do so many takes over and over, even just for audio voiceovers, to get them perfect, because getting the mic right and having no pop sounds and things like that, or I'd say something and I just kind of stumbled slightly, or I didn't space the sound well. It's a nightmare. And this, no practice, no editing. This is just as if you called me up and we're talking in a Google Meet. It's just I can't hear you.
Yeah.
For the viewers at home.
Exactly. All right. And so with that in mind, we are going to kick off a new series this year called Q&A with Matt K. You being Matt K. The Q's being questions from around the Salesforce ecosystem. Sometimes they'll be sourced internally from our company Slack channel. Sometimes they'll come from clients. Sometimes they'll come from the Trailblazer community, either online or in the comments on our videos. If you're watching this and you have a question, put it in the comments. We will throw it into the pipeline here. But these are all going to be questions, that Matt hasn't seen before, so we get some real on-the-fly responses. Probably a lot of stuttering, probably a lot of figuring it out as we go, and you'll get a better window into the way we operate, the way we think about Salesforce. And if you think that makes this a terrible demo, I mean, I'm not encouraging you to go tell us on LinkedIn, but feel free to post the videos wherever you want.
Right. And I guess to be fair, if we're not going to be rehearsing, there may not be an A in the Q&A.
Yeah.
So if we come up with a logo or anything like that, the Q probably needs to be bigger than the A, or the A is an optional A somehow. We'll put in parentheses.
Yeah. There will
Q and
always
maybe
be a
A.
Q, and
Yes.
there will always be T for thoughts, and then so like
Possibly an A.
yeah,
But the A may be like, we'll get back to you.
yeah, exactly. All right. So to kick off this inaugural session, we have a question that came in with a screenshot of an error message. So I'll throw that up on the screen. That is the wrong. There's the error message.
Perfect example of how this is unscripted, unedited.
Exactly. All right. And then here is our error. Method does not exist or incorrect signature, void, getGlobalDescribe from the type schema 512.
Yeah. So 5 is the row in the code. So we don't need to worry about that. When I first saw this, and in full disclosure, I've already looked into this and solved it. So I do know the answer to this question, and that's because I was not going to make someone internally wait until we filmed the video to figure out what the answer was. But when I first saw this, I was so frustrated because I was like, man, did Salesforce break something again? And of course, the answer was no, they didn't. This was silliness on someone's part, not realizing what they had done. But I definitely was a head scratcher. And so let's go ahead and I've kind of recreated the situation here. So here's an Apex class, and it's very common that we'll do global describes. So a global describe will get you all of the objects that are available in that org. And it's available from the schema class here, which is a built-in one. So if you go to the Apex documentation, you can see all of the built-in functionality, all the built-in methods that are in Apex, one of which is schema.getGlobalDescribe. Super useful for dynamic Apex. So we use this in a lot of the apps that we build. We use this in a lot of the orgs where we are building kind of generic functionality that needs to work in multiple places. And so we don't want to hard code something like, do this on an account. We want to get the list, and then we look through the list and we find something that we want to use, and we either maybe present it as drop downs, or we dynamically do a query, something like that. And so when I saw this, I was like, okay, what could it be? And I was like trying different stuff. The first thing I do is, okay, well, let's make sure that it really is this line of code, because every once in a while it happens where the parser somehow says it's this, but like I swear it's not. The error is actually something else, and it's like a missing semicolon somewhere, and so that happens. So the first thing I did was, let me just edit this out. Let me comment it out. And I deployed it then, and waited, and I waited, and I was like, okay, well, that works. So it's definitely this line of code. And again, I've taken away all the other code. There was a lot of other code. I took it all away. So it's definitely this line of code. So the next thing I said, okay, well, maybe it's just something weird with like where I'm in. In this case, we're in a constructor. And so I was like, let me try putting it at the top of the class. I'll define like a static, a constant here. We'll say final, and we'll say, usually I do something like this, global describe equals, and schema dot. And I was like, let me try and see if that does it. Maybe it's just something within this class here, or with this constructor that's causing the problem. No, I still got it, right? And so each time that you'll see it's pointing to the right line. So it's like, okay, this is behaving properly, but for some reason, even though the documentation says there is a getGlobalDescribe method, this is not working. And I was going nuts because I do global describes all the time, and I couldn't understand why it was not working in this case. And so I actually stepped away from my desk and did something totally unrelated to work, just tried to clear my mind. Came back later, and I think very quickly I realized what the problem was. So again, I did look at this ahead of time, so I wouldn't expect anyone to know it just from watching this video. But if you look, we have a class here called Schema. And again, I took away all the code, but this was the problem. So Schema is a reserved word to some extent in Apex, because there's a class called Schema that comes with Apex. But it's not reserved enough that Apex would stop you from creating your own Apex class called Schema. And so what that means is in this demo here, even though the words are the same in the way I've spelled them out, Apex is going to go to my class first before going to the built-in one. And so that's why it's saying here, hey, I don't know, there's no getGlobalDescribe available in this thing here. And so it's not finding it. Now I could actually come here and I could actually create a getGlobalDescribe. There we go. And do something like that. Let me go ahead and make the return type correct. Now, this is not what I would do to solve the problem, though. But we'll just show you that this actually is what's going on here. And I'm just going to make it return null just so that we can compile this real quick. Okay, so that compiled. And now if I come back to Q&A and I try to deploy, this time it should work because it's able to find a method in the schema class with that name. Yeah, so it did work. Okay, but the problem is that's not the schema. That's not the schema class I actually wanted to talk about. So the right thing to do here is to comment this out. Let's go ahead and do that. And then delete this one here, which means I probably would have to create a new one first because I can't just delete code when it's in use. So we create a new Apex class and we call this like, you know, I don't know, custom schema. Let's just call that. And I'd copy and paste all the code from custom schema, which really is this stuff here, and put it into this stuff here. Why did it do a test? Did I say it was a test class? Unrehearsed. Let's do that. And I'll take away that. And then we, oh, I got to change that. Ooh. Ah, okay, one more time. There we go. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, and then I can come and delete the schema class. So we'll go ahead and delete from project and org. Delete, you ideally want to back up first just to make sure. This is a sandbox too, so we're okay. Okay, that's gone. And now I can come back here and I can uncomment this out. And I could also, let's go ahead and do this. Let's see if that deploys. Okay, perfect. So that worked. So that was the issue. That's why it didn't find the real schema, because we had one called schema that we had created. And this is a mistake that I used to make a long time ago. There's a bunch of these keywords in Apex that you're allowed to use. And ideally, they would be so reserved that you could not use them, but they're not. And at this point, it's kind of dangerous for Salesforce to like say you can't use them because people may have used them already. But I've done this a lot before. I've created things like, let's do this one, public class test, right? Like, sure. And then we do stuff here. So like, this is my test, and I would do stuff related to test. Or I've done stuff like this where I say public class contact because I want to do something with contact, and then have here. And these could be inner classes. They could also be like full outer classes. But the point is, anytime you use a reserved word or keyword that isn't technically reserved from you using it, you risk the chance that something is going to break. So if I were to do contact dot like get s-object type now, that is going to break, right? Because of this thing down here. But if we comment this out, if I did it right, that then now it doesn't break because there's no such thing as a contact. And then same thing, if we were to do like if test is running test, which, you know, whether you like that or not, sometimes it has to be used. This is not going to work because we have something called tests in our Apex that this class is aware of. And it's like, no, what are you talking about? There's no such thing as is running tests. And so it's very important, even though these, from like an English logical perspective, might make sense to have in your code, these words, you don't want to ever use a word that's already used by Salesforce, whether it's an Apex class or an object name. You really don't want to, because you'll end up having some weird error one day and not know why, or another developer on your team will have that weird error and not know why. And so it's important that you don't do that. And so now let's go ahead and we'll comment this out and then deploy, and now this will work. Oh, I didn't even, yeah, sorry about that. Either way, it shouldn't have worked, I guess. And now I'll go back and prove. There we go. So this should fail, and it did fail because it says this thing here, this test, does not have a method called isRunningTest. And it won't automatically go to the next one, which would be the system level test class, and say, wait, do you have one? It doesn't do that. It just looks only here. And it doesn't matter whether it's an inner class inside this Q&A demo or if it's an outer one like that schema one I had before. It just says, sorry, I tried once, and that's that. So it's really important. Don't ever use a keyword. And like I said, I did this years ago, and I still do it occasionally, and I forget. And the other day when I saw this error, it took me a long time before I realized what it was. I seriously thought, oh my gosh, something happened over the weekend that broke Salesforce. But had I just taken a little more time to say, well, does it happen in another org? I would have seen it does not happen in another org. And then I would be like, okay, so it's something unique to this org. So it's got to be something that we did or some other developer did. And it can't be that the server for this one org somehow has a different version of Apex. Like, that's just not realistic. So I had to just kind of step away, clear my head, and then I quickly found the solution.
Cool. And I imagine that the average person searching for this error is a developer, so they probably know the answer to this, and I don't need to ask it. But from my outside perspective, so the issue was that we had a class that was created called Schema, which is one of those reserved keywords that Apex has. And so to fix it, we needed to basically call that something else.
Right.
So you cloned it and gave it a new name.
Yes. And so the problem is, it's not like it was an error that told us what the problem was. The error didn't say, hey, you created a class called Schema, and we already have one. You shouldn't do that.
Right.
The error just said, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no such thing as getGlobalDescribe. And I was like, yes, there is. I used it yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? Of course there is. Everyone knows that. And same is true if it was getIsRunningTest, or if I was referencing a contact field name or anything like that. Like, we know these things exist, but Apex and my code was talking about a different version of it or a different instance than the one that I normally was talking about.
Yeah.
You can imagine two people with the same name in a room, and there'd be confusion about that. And so that's the same confusion. But instead of saying, I'm sorry, there's two of you, it just gave this generic error message, which is an accurate error message. And if you search for that, you're not going to find a solution, because the only time you'll get that error message is if you accidentally created a class with the same name as one of these keyword/reserve words inside Apex.
Yeah. And so I suppose to be really helpful from an SEO perspective, we could post an article that has that text, but with every possible Apex keyword to say, like, hey, if you landed here, double check that you don't have a class named one of these things.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea, because there are people every day, or at least every week probably, who are making this silly mistake, especially if they're fairly new to Apex.
Yeah.
And they're going to, I remember the very first time I had this problem, I basically did is like kind of backtrack little by little until I didn't have the error. And then I slowly moved forward until the error. And I'm like, okay, I isolated it to the right line. And then you realize what it is. You're like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
And so we could save so much time in the world of Apex development if we actually did that. Even though I know it's going to be a lot to create all those pages, it actually would be worth it. I totally vote for us doing that.
Yeah, cool. I guess, so my question was, when we changed the class that we created, that custom class called the word that it shouldn't be called, Schema in this case, do we then need to look at any other places in the code that might have been pointing at that custom class and update the name there as well?
Yeah, exactly. So I updated it here from Schema to custom Schema.
Okay.
And so yeah, that's also it's a multi-step process. And if it's already out in the wild, if it's in production, it's even a longer multi-step process, because what you have to do is comment out I guess let me think. So we had the Schema class. We could have done a big deployment where we deploy the custom Schema class and all the pointers to the old Schema class, to the changes to point to the custom Schema. You could do it all at once, but often what I've done is do it piecemeal, where I like, okay, I'll create the custom schema class first, and I'll deploy that with test coverage, and then I'll go once I make sure everything works, I test it out in production like manually. Then I would go and do the deployment pointing to the new one, and then I would test again, and then I would go and deploy deletion of the old one. Yeah. And so it is, I mean, that's probably the right way to do it, is very slowly, methodically, kind of like a scientific approach, and make sure that you don't cause more problems. But that's only if it's already in production. If it's in sandbox and it's not in production, then you can do what I did, which is, just kind of do it quickly. And if it was a more unique word, schema unfortunately might be used in other places. We could do an edit and find in files. Mm-hmm. I love, actually, you could do a replace in files, sorry. And then we could have done like this, custom schema, right? You run the risk, if I were to do it now, we would actually be replacing the word custom schema with custom schema. So you do run the risk for stuff like that. Places here that's showing up, schema dot. Well, that's the correct use of the word schema.
Right.
And so I'm sure there are better ways of doing this. Like I could do it maybe like an equals. And maybe that would limit the results, although even there we got it too. Yeah. But at least you would be able to find them in all your Apex classes, and at least identify all the places that you have to do the replacement in order to delete that Apex class.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely the kind of thing that you're better off catching as early as possible, and ideally never doing in the first place.
Right. So that's really what you want to do, is like when you sit down to write your Apex for the very first time, look at the list of Apex classes that are built in, the system classes, and make sure you don't use any of those words. And the same is true for the names of objects. So for instance, when you're creating your first Apex class, and it probably is like a trigger or something like that, you're often thinking, well, this is an Apex class that I'm going to use with the account object, so I'll call this class account. And it's like, no, that's the exact opposite of what you want. Right? You can say account handler or account helper or something like that extent, but don't just call it account. And same thing for your very first test class that you're going to write. Don't call it test singular. That's taken already. Even though it'll let you do it, don't do it. Be more descriptive, and that way you won't choose something that's already built in and is a special word, a keyword.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, if you were watching along with this and having that issue, now you know what the problem is. And if you had that same issue, but the word wasn't schema, it was contact or account or lead or test, you also know. And it's kind of like that saying about planting a tree, only in reverse. The best time to fix this mistake is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And maybe we'll call this video, "Don't make this mistake when you're writing Apex for the first time."
Yeah.
But thank you, Matt, for our first Q&A with Matt K. I will work on getting those pages up with all of the possible keywords, because I know that the person that asked this question definitely Googled it before they threw the question up in our Slack, and so we could have saved them.
I Googled it too, and I didn't find that. So I was shocked. I was like, how can it be that no one has posted this issue? And that's when I got worried. I was like, oh my gosh, what if it's a brand new issue and I just discovered it?
Yeah.
But that was kind of silly thinking. It was obviously something much simpler, and not some low level server issue.
Yeah. But that's always first week of the new year thoughts, is you get back to the desk, something doesn't work, and you go, how long has this been broken? It's the year changed and now everything broke. So
pretty much.
Great. Well, thank you again, Matt. Thank you, folks, for watching. Do please be sure to like and subscribe. And like we said, if you have any questions that you would like to see answered informally, off the cuff, and rapidly, then please leave them here in the comments below, or reach out to us on social media, the App Exchange, or give us a call. Until next time, we will be here answering your questions. Thanks again, Matt.
Thank you.